So, welcome to Consumption Conversations. And this time we have with us Edina Vadovics from Hungary, and she's going to be a keynote speaker at the next year's Global SCORAI Conference in Brazil in June 2026. So, it's a pleasure to have you, Edina, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you for the invitation, Valerie. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be talking to other Scoriers and anyone else in this virtual way. So I'm Edina Vadovics. I live in Hungary, and I'm research director of Green Dependent Institute, which is a small non-profit research and action organization. So at this organization, our main mission is to promote sustainable lifestyles, very much in line with SCORAI's objectives as well. And in fact, I have been involved in SCORAI Global and now in SCORAI Europe almost from their birth. So I have been part of the SCORAI community for ages.
So tell us a little bit more about your most recent activity, which has just been released about living in 1.5 degree lifestyles.
Yes, I have recently been doing a lot of research and action related to energy citizenship and 1.5 degree lifestyles. And we have just completed a 4-year-long research project with the involvement of 7 countries, 10 organizations. And as usual, we have talked to, of course, researchers, policymakers, businesses, but we took quite a lot of effort to talk to citizens, and this is why we have produced a guide, a citizen guide to 1.5 degree lifestyles. And in this guide, we really want to provide research-based evidence to people, to everyone really, well, including actually policymakers, researchers, businesses as well, on how to prioritize their 1.5 degree lifestyle related actions or climate action, which are the most impactful lifestyle options to take, whether they vary between countries, because we find that yes, there are some general directions, but they do vary. And then we also want to give very practical advice. Well, I hope we are succeeding in giving very practical advice on how to put this in practice, what to do, how to change, who to find for support and things like that.
So this is a guide for citizens. If we look at the different agents of change towards more sustainable lifestyles, so some people say it's the institutional structures, it's top down, it's government, it's infrastructures. Some are saying it's bottom up, it's citizens, it's people in general in their consumption behavior. And some people are saying, no, it's somewhere in the middle. There are agents of change who are kind of mediators between the top and the bottom, kind of middle out has been called, where they're kind of influencing the way people are living their lifestyles, but they're not directly the policymakers. Where do you think the most effective directions and agents of change are, and are they different in different countries?
I think all of these agents of change need to be involved, and indeed, still in this research project, the EU 1.5 degree lifestyles research project, we have found that one of the important barriers to change is that we engage in this so-called responsibility ping pong, that some people say, policymakers and businesses say, yes, we need citizens to demand the change and make the change. The citizens are saying, no, it's actually the big companies and we need much more ambitious action and strategies from policymaking. But in fact, we all need to change. And it's really important that all actors take responsibility and find the best way they can change. And of course, responsibilities vary. based on power, influence, resources available. So some organizations and some people are more responsible, others less, but we still all have to find a way to work together. And yes, it varies from country to country because and here I bring in an example from my energy citizenship related research, where we looked at which actors are most active or initiating change towards a more sustainable energy system. And we found that in Western European countries, for example, citizens and groups of citizens are much more active to get into individual and action, and they start change, they start energy communities, they start to petition their policymakers. But for example, in Eastern and Central European countries, citizens tend to be less active and less initiative taking. And here, to kick off, for example, energy citizenship related initiatives, municipalities and NGOs have quite an important role to help citizens to get going, to teach the skills of how to be active, how to stand up for your rights, how to start something completely new. I'm not saying that we don't have citizens, or in Western Europe, municipalities and NGOs are not important. It's just there are different ways that activism and change starts. So at this level, there is quite an interesting difference actually at the moment. Of course, it changes. And if we look outside Europe, I'm sure it's even more varied. But the important thing is that we all get active and we find ways to communicate. That's again from the 1.5 degree lifestyles project, is we organize thinking labs, multi-stakeholder thinking labs, and we have found that they are really important to bring different stakeholders together to get so that they can understand each other, and then they can come up with aims that they create together, and they can also imagine a 1.5 degree future or a sustainable future together. So these I would say are the important things. It's not as concrete as you might have expected, but I guess that's how change happens.
Why aren't they doing it? We know that they have the directions of change. We know there are different actors, as you say, and they all need to get on with it. Why aren't they doing it? What's holding them back? Where are the barriers? What do we need to get over in order that these various actors would actually get on and do what we think they need to do?
Yeah, well, there are different factors, of course, and different barriers, but one of the biggest barriers that we have found in various research projects is that we all subscribe to this idea of growth and you know, the overpowering nature of GDP and capitalism. And because we associate the good life with large houses, large cars, fly away holidays, eating steaks. And this is, I'm not saying there are no exceptions to this, but this is a very general trend, and it is a really big barrier to ambitious policy making, to changing lifestyles, to changing business practices, because we believe that we are making progress, we are developing if we are growing, and not just immaterially, which is of course important, but in material terms as well. Of course, there are other barriers as well, but this seems to be one of the largest barriers, that we think that if we are not growing, we are not progressing, our life is not getting better. So we have to find ways. That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges for us researchers as well, to find ways that show, and examples that show that, okay, growth is, you can be happy without owning much and having a really large footprint.
So are there any countries or any cities around the world that you're aware of that you would say, look at them, they've got it going in the right direction?
Well, Bhutan is an often cited examples because they have, instead of GDP, they have gross national happiness, and they have worked out a really interesting and useful indicator system. And now, even in the EU, there is a beyond growth process, and beyond growth research, and a lot of discussion with policymaking and also businesses to look at business methods, business strategies, and also policy strategies that support in some ways degrowth. I know degrowth is not the best word, but it's quite a challenging word, and a lot of people know about it. So there is this beyond growth discussion ongoing, and also the post-growth discussion, I think, also in the US. So it's happening, and good examples are being found. There are community level examples as well, and or even individual lifestyle examples as well. But they haven't really made their way into the mainstream. They haven't really been showcased enough by the media, even by us researchers, I should say, how this is possible, how to show that people and communities and cities can really function this way, and no challenges occur, well, setbacks of course occur, but it's possible. There is a good initiative. I'm sure many people have heard about donut economics, which started out as a theory to show how it's possible to live within limits, environmental limits, and also social limits, so that basic needs can be met. So it's really important that these two are brought together. But it has been turned into a practical tool as well. And there is now something called the Donut Economics Action Lab, working from the UK, but they work globally, and it's supporting, facilitating, inspiring communities, businesses, municipalities to work out strategies about how to live, so to say, within the donut, so within ecological and social limits. So I think it's a really inspiring process, and following their website and newsletter, I can see that there is a lot happening, and a lot of trials and workshops and events are ongoing to work out how this can be put into practice.
So if I look around the world, not just looking at European or Western cultures, if I go a bit wider with SCORAI, looking at a global picture, and saying, well, who does have a lower ecological footprint and a high social achievement? Let's take the Human Development Index of the UN as a possible way of looking at it. And it comes up, let's say, with Costa Rica and maybe Vietnam. And they're not the normal models that you would present to a European audience. Is it possible that people living in Europe or Western cultures would be willing also to open themselves and look and learn from rather different examples from around the world?
I think so. I think there is a lot of interest in learning about these examples, countries as well as communities, even about ancient cultures, because there is a lot of literature on ancient cultures and how they manage, some of them still manage to live close to nature and integrate into nature much more than we do. And yes, there is an openness. Even in Hungary, there is an annual festival that it has been turned into an alternative kind of festival where researchers, NGOs, and even some municipal level policymakers are going to learn about these ways, to investigate new ways, and also at the same time, in the framework of the festival, put it into practice as well. So there is interest even for religions that are associated with some of these cultures as well. So I would say there is quite a lot of hope, especially now we are living in these very turbulent times all over the world, really, we can say. And although this often doesn't get into the mainstream, people are searching for ways to live differently. Even I keep mentioning the 1.5-degree lifestyles project, but in Hungary, we were actually taken aback by the positive reaction that we received and the interest we received in these lifestyles, and how many places we get invited to talk about it. And it's not just communities, but many businesses that invite us to go and investigate and talk about it. So I feel this bubbling interest and bubbling and growing interest in these alternative ways.
That's good to hear. But can you give us a little bit more, take us a little bit more deeply into Hungary, because it is a country which underwent such an enormous change over its years, its our lifetimes. What happened? What the differences that we can see, or the good and the bad, or what we had, or what we'll lose, and what we should prevent loss of some things that were good, between what happened during communist regime times and what's happening post-communist regime times in Hungary, and in terms of how people are happy with their lives, but how people are living more sustainably. Can you give us a little bit more of your own insights into Hungary?
Yeah, we underwent a really interesting process. Well, not on our own, but in other countries as well. But when it was the regime change at the end of the 1980s and beginning of 1990s, there was a lot of talk and discussion about a third way, and whether we would manage to find a third way, which is not state socialism or communism, and not capitalism, but a third way. So there was a real interest in finding that, defining it, and trying to go that way. But in the end, the appeal of capitalism and more comfort, more consumption, and independence, and a bit of freedom, because during communism, I was a teenager, well, I was growing up in communism, and I was 18 or 19 when the regime changed, so I have quite a lot of experience. Consumption was really limited. And now I look back at it and say that, yeah, that was really good. We really didn't consume and that much. We, of course, had our basic needs met, and in this, communism was actually quite good. No one was really left behind, but there was a very high price for that. So we were trying to find this third way, but as I said, capitalism was just too appealing because of the freedom, because of not being limited this way, because of being able to have our own homes, our own cars, our own everything. And so the people and everyone decided to go that way. But since it didn't happen so long ago, there are still a lot of things that are saved. Like still a lot of people know how to garden, how to grow at least some of their own food, how to make preserves. We had quite good structures for sharing, and sharing is actually a challenging example that I'm sharing, because, as I said, we were really good at it. We shared cars because there weren't many cars. Even my parents operated an informal car sharing system. But we don't, now the result is we don't want to share it because we had to share. It was forced. No one made us see that it's actually nice to share, except for some alternative religious groups, not these institutionalized big religions, because they were associated with the state and supported the state. But the alternative ones, yes, sharing was valued, but that was really not the mainstream. So now no one wants to share because we have such a bad past and forced past past about sharing, sorry. Uh,
So how
so
would you bring it back? You say if sharing would be a good concept for sustainable consumption, but it cannot be brought back in a forced way because that's obviously unacceptable, and it cannot be a symbol of we don't have, of not being able to have, or poverty or lack of ability. And people say now, yes, we have the ability, but how would you communicate such an idea today as sharing in Hungary when the forced sharing had such a bad memory for many of the population who lived through the communist time? How would
yes,
you
we really,
rephrase it, reframe it, recommunicate it, reconstruct it in a way which would make it more acceptable today?
yes, we really need to work on that. But actually, I also have some ideas from citizen thinking labs that we conducted when we asked people, okay, you don't want to share, it's clear uh, when you indicate your preferences, but if we had to share because resources are scarce and we have really challenging big global problems, what would help you share? And they said that if we communicated the positive values and positive outcomes of sharing, like for example, if you share some of your living space, you have smaller homes, but you have larger shared spaces like living rooms and libraries and maybe washing rooms and these kind of things. Um, you can actually, in the end, have a larger home and larger space, and you can have lower rent, but can still, because your own space is smaller, but you can still have a lot of enjoyment from these shared spaces, and maybe even have services provided to you that you wouldn't be able to afford on your own, like saunas and maybe swimming pools or bigger gardens. Um, then they would be happier to share. So if this was communicated like that, like more values, more enjoyment, more life satisfaction, at the same time less rent, less overheads to pay, they would be happy to share. Same with cars. If okay, you cannot have your own car, you should be sharing your cars, but if you share in a community, you can actually have access to different cars based on your needs, a small car or a van, or even a camper van. If you share in a community overall, there could be much fewer cars, but people could have access in theory to more cars. And if sharing was communicated this way, that actually it reduces your environmental impact, but maybe we shouldn't focus on that, but increasing enjoyment and life satisfaction and the satisfaction of needs, then they would be happier to share. And it's actually the same with some of the practices that we have from the past, like having your own garden. During COVID, interestingly, a lot of people took up gardening again, and they started enjoying chemical-free food. They could be sure where the food was coming from. They also found enjoyment in being able to provide for themselves, and they started exchanging their extra produce with others, and this way getting new products. So again, also not just gardening, but sharing came into the picture. So I think we have to emphasize more satisfaction, more enjoyment, um, more happiness. And then we can start saying, okay, by the way, you actually have a smaller or reduced environmental impact as well.
That's a great message. And I think it's a great message to end on, and to say, let's hope we can pick that up in SCORAI and maybe at the Global SCORAI conference, and change the conversation perhaps from talking about degrowth and talk about let's make it more enjoyable Let's make it more happier. Let's redefine between what is private and what is public, what is individual and what is shared, and where we can get enjoyment and life satisfaction together in groups and not just by individual gain. So I think that's a great message, Edina, and let's hope we can take it forward in SCORAI and in the conversations and also pick it up in the conference in Brazil. So thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day, and I hope everybody will come and hear you and join in the global conference in Brazil in June 2026. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, and I look forward to taking these ideas forward with everyone else. Thank you.